At EA Play, I got to sit down with two of the developers of Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, head of narrative Aaron Contreras and audio director Nick Leviers. We talked about the game for nearly 30 minutes, and they answered more of my questions than I was expecting. Like the title says, they even confirmed for me that the second sister is a brand new character and is not Barriss Offee, as many people, including myself, had guessed. There's more to be discovered in the interview, so I hope you enjoy. What's up, guys? I'm sitting here with Aaron, the narrative lead of Fallen Order, and Nick, the audio director. How's it going, guys?
Pretty good. How you doing?
Great. Really excited to play the game. I haven't put my hands on it yet, but the demo was really cool. The Game Informer article had a lot of really great details in it that I'm excited to learn more about, and we're just going to ask you a bunch of questions. I bet you can't answer a lot of them, but that's okay.
We're going to do our darndest.
All right. So the question I've heard a lot from my fans is just how long is the game? What will the full story take? And I'm sure it's going to differ depending on a player's style, but if you had an average length, what would you guess that would be?
Well, I'm going to throw Nick under the bus with this question.
We can't say exactly how long the game is. I expect you're expecting us to
Yeah,
say that.
I'll put a little counter up and say.
But it's a AAA game, so you can use your imagination as to how, what the scale of it is. There's a lot in there. There's there's replayability in there. You're going to be able to play the game in different ways. There's a main storyline that you play through, but there's also side content as well. So there's a lot in there for players. They're not going to be disappointed.
Well, that was, you're jumping ahead. So there are side quests, kind of optional objectives that the player can experience?
I'm going to throw Aaron under the bus now.
There you are. This is going to be combative. I guess I started this, didn't I? So the player, our story is generally pretty linear. It starts and stops at specific points, but the player path is not linear. We're heavily inspired by Metroidvania games, so we allow retraversal. If you see in the demo that we did at EA Play, Cal will go inside the ship, he'll go to a galaxy map, he'll select different planets. So the player will be driving the order and the locations that they go through in the game based on what they unlock and what they uncover.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, you're just answering things that I haven't even asked yet. So
Cool.
There is kind of a hub, and yeah, you mentioned, or the Game Informer article mentioned that there were like this very Metroid feel where you can go back to places you've seen, reach new areas once you unlock new abilities.
Yep.
So we saw in the demo that Cal was unlocking skill points. What kind of abilities can you purchase with those points?
So throughout the game, you'll have your lightsaber as your main tool, you'll have your buddy droid, BD-1, and you'll have the Force as your ally. And all three of those things will evolve over the course of the game. Some of that will be driven by some sort of, the skill point system, which we showed off. So you'll be able to focus on specific areas of that skill tree, kind of at your discretion as a player as you move through. And then other times there'll be story moments like we saw in the demo where BD-1 gets upgraded with the overcharge ability, which will happen at specific moments in the story.
Okay, cool. And well, since we're talking about BD-1, we need to talk about his development, especially because I know that Ben Burtt was involved with his creation. Can you talk about just how BD-1 came to be?
Yeah, sure. So we were very keen, obviously we were inspired by Ben Burtt to talk about the Ben Burtt thing. We were very, very keen to work with Ben. So we decided that his contribution would be working on the droid voice. So we've been, about a year ago, we had Ben come down to the studio. We showed him everything we had regarding the droid, got him stoked up with stuff, and then he went away and created a bunch of different droids for us, different approaches to the droid's voice. I think we started off with about 5 of them, and we ended up kind of, the way the voice evolved, it was kind of like an amalgam of 2 or 3 of those 5 original ideas. And of course all of the ideas were very true to Ben's style. You think about Wally, you think about R2-D2, and BD's voice, it's kind of got this really warm analog sort of feel, and he feels very warm and friendly. So that's how the Ben Burtt thing evolved. I mean, but there are other aspects to this story as well. So then kind of fast forward a year to where we are now, we've just finished our PCAP shoot. And we've got this, on set we really wanted to get, to bring BD to life from the earliest possible moment that we could, So we had a guy on set, a chap called Gideon, who played the part of BD. We had a 3D printed model of BD, which he would kind of puppeteer, and he would do a voice as well. Deborah Wilson, the lady that plays Seer, gave him this South African flute, which we weren't expecting to happen, but we ended up using that as our kind of proto BD voice for the shoots. So he'd be basically puppeteering BD and going, delivering all of the emotions, and then Ben would use that as a framework to work to. So that kind of turned into our process for creating the BD voice in the game. And then obviously there are other aspects that have kind of played into building BD's character besides, the sound side. There's also some amazing work been done on the animations by our animators back at the studio, which really give him warmth and character.
Well, I'm primarily a lore channel, so can you tell me anything about BD1's in-universe history?
Yeah, I can do a little bit. So one positive ingredient of our partnership with Lucasfilm is that droids have a very specific purpose in the Star Wars universe. And we were told that they don't like it when droids can do anything at any time. It gives that a new hatch opens and whatever MacGuffin you need at that point in the story, the droid can do it.
Like rocket boosters on an astromech?
I'm not going to get specific about stuff. But that actually makes sense. So if you look at the design of an astromech, if you look at R2-D2, the ability for a droid that's operating in space to be able to kind of like magnet stick to the hull of a spaceship and travel on the outside and then maybe fly from one location to the other in ZOG makes perfect sense for a space mechanic, right? So from that, when working on the biography and the background of BD1, we aligned BD very specifically around an explorer droid. So if you're an archaeologist or a scientist or somebody who's off in some crazy, Dagobah-style planet somewhere out in the Star Wars universe and you're by yourself for months or years at a time, you bring along a BD unit with you. And if you look at BD1, how aware of Cal it is, it's always looking up at Cal, it's checking in on him, and it's not just like his physical condition, but it's also his emotional state, how he's reacting, what situation he's in, and that's very much like a companion dog, like a Boston Terrier, for example, is super tuned in to its owner's emotional state and needs. So BD's there to be your buddy, explicitly, like it's designed to be your pal, but that also goes into like more functional verbs it has, like healing you, scanning crazy stuff in the environment for science, or hacking down stuff or all kinds of things like that.
If you do anything to that droid, I'm coming after you. We got to see the little model, and he's precious.
I don't know, will BD1 survive the events of Jedi Fallen Order? I think we'll have to play the game to find out.
Aaron, please. So we kind of touched on side quests and stuff. Do you have any plans for potential end game content once you beat the game? Will there be a new game plus, or are there any combat challenges or other single player content that we can expect?
We're not really specifically talking about anything in that capacity today, but we are looking at making the game replayable and deep.
Sure.
Whether that's in the context of a new game plus, the context of combat challenges, or in the context of difficult puzzles or hidden areas, which lore knowledge or really skill at combat or skill at environmental traversal will open up for you. All that stuff's sort of on the table and is really actively being explored right now.
Great. Well, you mentioned Metroidvania already. Were there any specifically Star Wars games that you've looked back at for inspiration?
Obviously, any game where you've run around and that's delivered on Jedi fantasy has been a touchstone for us. Personally, I go back all the way to TIE Fighter, X-Wing versus TIE Fighter, and the OG LucasArts games as being big inspirations. I don't think, though, that we're really looking at those games as a direct reference for what we're doing with gameplay. As far as the game design, we're looking at other third-person action-adventure games, especially ones that have a melee combat component to them, that are coming out now in the market, and that's where we're positioning ourselves for space in game design.
Great.
As far as lore goes, we're looking at everything Star Wars that's ever existed.
Would that include Legends material?
Absolutely.
So can we expect maybe some things that have been made Legends to come back into...
I don't think I can confirm or deny anything in particular, but I think as you've seen since Legends has gone away, you've seen different ingredients like Thrawn getting reintroduced in Rebels happen, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's some of that happening inside our game already. it's happening all over in Star
Yeah.
Wars. So it's kind of cool how you see stuff from this extended universe sort of get like redesigned and sort of reintegrated and put back into, you know, mainstream or canon Star Wars material.
Yeah. How about familiar locations? Will we be seeing any places we've seen before?
Nick, where are we going?
Well, we're going to Kashyyyk,
Oh.
believe it or not. Yeah, there will be familiar locations. You know, there's going to be some new ones, but there's also going to be some ones that we're familiar with from the films as well.
Cool. So yeah, we know about Braca and Kashyyyk, and I think those might be the only two.
Those are the only ones so
Is there-
far, yes.
Is there a good mix between old and new, or how about? Do you know how many planets
Well,
total?
I've heard Aaron, to quote Aaron, say about 50-50.
It's about 50.
So I'm going
Cool.
to, yeah. And I think that's right. Yeah, about 50-50.
Sounds like a perfect mix of
Yeah.
nostalgia and something new to explore. How many planets can we expect to explore in total?
You have to play the game.
Okay.
Yeah, you're going to play that.
Speaking of kind of outside content, legends and stuff, what was it like developing this game alongside Charles Soule's Darth Vader comic, where I believe you guys were bringing up the Purge Troopers, and then they integrated that into the comic, and same with the Second Sister.
Right.
What was that process like?
I had no direct contact with Charles Soule or with Marvel throughout the entire process. So Lucasfilm and the Lucasfilm Story Group really look at the meta narrative for the Star Wars IP and where they want to take it, and they've been working with us hand in hand through audio, through really all aspects of the game, throughout the development process. And they saw the opportunity with, you know, I think we wanted to make a group of Jedi hunters, and at the same time, Charles Soule was looking to do something similar with the comics. And that's happening all over, I think, with people working on Star Wars. There's a real kind of zeitgeist of people arriving at good ideas at the same time across different groups all over. It's happened multiple times throughout the course of development, which is very exciting. So Lucasfilm was really good about reaching out and trying to make that happen and make that a possibility for us.
So we could probably expect that there will be more connections to the canon universe, even outside that comic?
I wouldn't be surprised.
I won't be either then. For example, we already know that Saw Gerrera is going to be in the game. Are we going to be able to see any other surprise cameos?
I think just like our answer about what planets we'll go to, for sure, I'd expect to see more familiar Star Wars locations and faces inside the game, but we don't want to tell you about them because that would be spoiling the fun of meeting them in person.
Well,
We want to make it good for the fans, so
Yeah.
is General Veers in it? This is a question for a friend.
I'm not answering that.
Is Constable Zuvio in
I'm
it?
not answering any
Oh,
of
I
this.
tried, guys. I tried.
I will say, and this is special for you guys,
Oh, okay.
that unfortunately Jedi Master Yaddle is not appearing
Well,
in Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, but we're holding out hopes for a sequel.
but he didn't say no to Constable Zuvio. So, oh man, how much can the player affect Cal's story? I mean, you mentioned that it's kind of linear, but not totally. Like
Yeah.
we can choose what we want to do and when. Are there multiple endings to the game?
I don't really want to talk about that yet.
Okay.
Generally speaking, though, where Cal has a specific story and a specific narrative, and part of the ingredients of what makes a Star Wars story is this kind of sense of the cinematic narrative. And we're really trying to capture with our game. We're not an RPG. We're a third-person action-adventure game. So we want to execute on an interactive cinematic narrative, which is very challenging and very expensive, which usually means that you're not, going off and wildly changing the storyline by the course of player actions.
Yeah.
You can influence it and color it, but usually the events of the game are sort of set.
Cool.
You have to experience those.
And speaking of Cal, so there's been a big push online recently for more diverse protagonists in Star Wars, and Cal is kind of very similar to Kanan Jarrus, another Order 66 survivor in age and race and gender, and even his original name, Caleb. What was the thought process behind developing Cal, and how is he going to be unique from Kanan?
I think they're very different characters. Like, I've seen all of Rebels, Freddie Prinze Jr., right? He
Yeah.
did the voice, did a fantastic job bringing Kanan to life. But they're very different, and their stories are very different. There's certain similarities, of course, because of where they exist in the timeline, their relative age, and stuff like that. But they're very different stories and very different storylines, and we're not retreading ground. He's not a rehash of somebody else. He's not San Holo or kind of like a rehash of somebody. Cal's not of somebody you've seen inside the Star Wars universe. Cal really came from our first writer on the project, who was on the project before I joined, Matt Miknovitz, who was a writer on the Clone Wars series and Rebels, and our game director, Stig Asmussen. And they wanted, they came up with this sort of survivor character who's reserved, measured in his actions, a bit laconic at times, but will do the right thing and sort of has that spark of heroism inside him, but isn't necessarily an obvious hero. And it's really just that creative impulse. We didn't create Cal in context of other characters in Star Wars or any sort of need. He's not trying to check off boxes. It's just sort of the character they created. I will say that in the course of casting Cal Kestis, we didn't have a set ethnicity for Cal, so we actively, openly, and I was directly involved with the casting process, so I was really part of this process. I saw it firsthand. We looked at actors from wildly diverse a range of backgrounds and ethnicities and all sorts of things, everything under the sun. And when we landed on Cameron Monaghan, it's because he really fit the character that we had written the best, and we were just blown away by his capacity as an actor and his passion for Star Wars and video games.
I think I was actually told that was similar to how they cast for Iden Versio, where they developed the character first and then cast a big net, and they landed on Janina. And
that's not unique to Cal. Every single one of our human characters, we set no ethnicity for them, and in many cases we try to look at multiple genders. So we just try to open the net up as wide as possible and see who spoke the character to us as closely as possible.
Great. Will there be any tie-in books or comics or other media that goes along with?
I don't think anything's been announced yet, has it? Nothing's been announced.
Nothing's been announced.
Yeah.
Okay. You guys are good at this. Can you control any characters besides Cal throughout the game?
You're playing as Cal Kestis.
Okay. Can you fight with a blaster or any other weapons, or is it the Force and your lightsaber and BD-1 and that's it?
Force and your lightsaber.
Great. Is there any dismemberment in combat? I've had a lot of people ask about that.
Yep. That's a hot button topic, which I'm going to throw Nick under the bus for, because I've been taking too much of the mic time here.
Where you can dismember flame beetles.
Okay. So that's a yes.
So there is a degree of dismemberment, but how far we go with it, we're not saying at this stage. And I think there are a lot of things which we're still working through in the development process. So, but yes, flame beetles, definitely yes, you can cut them in half. And you can also dismember inanimate objects as well. So that kind of thing that looks like a sausage with a stick thing sticking out of it, you can dismember that.
You can go Kylo on that.
Yeah, there you go.
You can chop up the environment. Yeah. Obviously, I mean, we're not really talking about dismemberment too much. It's a topic which the dev team's interested to explore, but you have to look. We're making a teen-rated game, right?
So something that jumped out to me when we watched the demo yesterday was you got to see the start menu a little bit, and it looked a lot like the World Between Worlds from Star Wars Rebels. Any chance that we'll be revisiting some of that more mystical aspect of the Force?
It is not the World Between Worlds.
Oh, okay.
Yep. There's some symbolism there, which I don't think you would be wrong to connect in the sense of Jedi,
right?
An ancient Jedi, but it is explicitly not the World Between Worlds.
Okay. Yep. Good to know. What kind of collectibles can be found throughout the game?
You can, customization options, things like that.
Or just, are there things to collect throughout the maps?
Sure.
Things to find?
So we have a wide variety of environmental storytelling techniques that we're going to use. BD-1 is an explorer companion droid, so it's super excited to go off and scan weird alien murals, or if you find a slavering alien beast, it wants to go over and scan its teeth. So you can go off and scan stuff with BD-1. That'll get added to your databank, sort of our in-game codex.
That also reminds me of Metroid Prime.
Yeah. Again, that's a very big influence for the team. Cal, which hasn't been touched on too much this weekend, but we show it in the demo, goes up to a dead stormtrooper and touches his body. So Cal has the ability of psychometry.
I was going to ask about
which
that.
Is the ability
Quinlan Voss, right?
Quinlan Voss has, yes, and Rey sort of manifests in some capacity in The Force Awakens. And that's a huge opportunity for us with environmental storytelling, to have this hero who can go and sense the echo on a force that's tied to a corpse or an object and touch it and get a piece of its story information. And that kind of plays out throughout the game in interesting ways. So that's sort of between BD-1 and psychometry. That's kind of our technology, exploration of the world, and our force exploration of the world. And then there's also the ability just to unlock different skins, different costumes for Cal, color variations for his outfit, different skins for the ship, things like that.
Yeah. So how many customizable objects are there in the game?
I believe so far we've announced the Mantis, which is your ship. You can get a skin for the Mantis, skins for BD1, outfit colors for Cal, and then some lightsaber customization.
Cool. You mentioned BD1 as like an archaeology droid, and I am super into Indiana Jones. So is there like an element of kind of exploring old ruins, archaeology? Some of the concept art kind of hints at that.
I think that would be, yeah. Well, I wouldn't say they were actively trying to make this an Indiana Jones Star Wars story. That's really never been a thought on the team. You're often these crazy, oftentimes abandoned or remote locations. Yeah. Even Kashyyyk, which is the forest planet, once you get past the Imperial Outpost, there's the Shadowlands, there's this crazy untamed forest. So you're going to go out there and do stuff out in the wild, so you're going to get that sort of like explorer feel for sure.
That's my jam.
Yeah, you're going to like it.
Watching the combat in the demo, and I think they stressed pretty hard that this was one of your best players, and it was like his third try, and it's 3 hours into the game, but Cal, for a Padawan, felt like he was handling himself pretty well, and I like a lot of that has to do with it's a game, and you want it to be fun. You want to have like psychometry and his new force slow, but how do you balance that where you're having fun with a game, but also he's just a Padawan? How was it approaching that challenge?
I'll speak to the fictional side, and then I'll pass it off to Nick for talking about kind of our approach towards difficulty in combat. Does that sound good? Okay. So from the fictional side, Cal, his training wasn't complete, but we're also advanced a little bit in the story, and I think in any game, or really in any narrative, if you look at Luke Skywalker or Rey, you pick stuff up fast. Yeah. So we're kind of past that early curve where you're really, you've unlocked BD1, you've got your lightsaber, you've got some force powers unlocked, and you're sort of using those in the environment. But we definitely have that sort of early stages pacing in the game. We're just kind of showing you a hero, because we wanted to show off gameplay, when he's got a bit more of his toolkit unlocked by that point. But Cal's sort of unlocking and growing and reconnecting with the Force throughout the entire story. So it's something that sort of discontinues from that point forward. And I'll turn it over to Nick for the next part of the question.
Okay. And what was the next part of the question? Sorry.
Talking about our approach towards combat difficulty and, Blair being an expert player.
Yeah, I mean, you can. I think you want it to be entertaining for the player as soon as possible. So you're going to need to kind of unlock a certain amount of the abilities. But then what you do with the abilities is very much in response to the enemies that you have to fight and the situations you find yourself in. So that, what we've shown this weekend, I know for a fact you can play that by button mashing. You don't. You can use some of the abilities. I mean, you've seen some very expert players do it, but as you go through the game, you're going to be called upon to use those abilities at an expert level more and more. But the game gives you the opportunity to practice them and use them in different combinations. So being able to basically force push a guy off a cliff, then sort of like freeze him in midair, jump down, and then pull him to you and shoot him at somebody else. That's kind of like a nice to have at the moment, but further down the game, you'll need to use those kind of skills for real.
Yeah, I've heard that it was punishing.
Yes.
And like I said, I haven't touched it yet, but
yeah. And obviously the skills themselves and the range of abilities will ramp up. So that there will definitely be additional abilities and then different powers of abilities that you can get to.
To clarify, though, I don't think we would describe our game as punishing in terms of the combat difficulty.
Okay. We're trying to support different difficulty modes for advanced players, but Star Wars is for everyone in every way. That's kind of our philosophy for it. So whether you're a hardcore From Software, level 1 all the way through those games player, or if you're just somebody who really likes the movies and isn't super skilled with a controller and wants to experience the story and experience the fantasy of being a Jedi, we're trying to make something that will.
We're going to have difficulty levels so that if you're a story person and you just want to enjoy the story more, then we're not going to punish you. We're going to let you enjoy it.
Very relevant to me because I kind of my hope for this game for myself is that like I kind of want to feel like I'm struggling a little bit to put myself in Cal's shoes. And so what level of difficulty would you recommend I play on?
Oh, those are all still. We haven't locked those.
We
down.
know.
Okay.
We're still playing with that. Yeah, for sure.
I'll email you when it comes.
I mean, I don't consider myself to be the world's greatest player, but I really enjoy playing it, and every time I play, I'm playing it slightly differently. I mean, I'm a developer of the game, so my job is to play through the game over and over and over again. I mean, that's how we do the music, really. I need to know how it feels to play the game, so you can figure out how we're going to score it. So I start off by button mashing, and I try more fancy stuff. So I think you're going to enjoy it.
Yeah. We'll have a mode for you.
Yeah,
Great.
We will have the mode for you.
Some of us are pretty hardcore. We'll punish you.
All right, cool.
If you ask for it.
I want to talk about Cal for just a little bit. How has Order 66 affected him? I know this is like 5 years on, but did he experience it firsthand?
That's a very interesting question, which you should play the game Jedi Fallen Order
I'd love to.
discover the details of. Obviously, we've announced that Cal was a Padawan, that he survived the events of Order 66, that he survived the fall of the Order, and that he ended up on Braca after all that shook out. I really don't want to say anything more than that because there's a story to tell there.
Of course.
So I can't wait for you to experience it.
And how about Saw Gerrera? What's he like at this point? Because it's closer to when we last saw him in the Clone Wars than his kind of teetering on the edge of insanity that we find him in Star Wars Rebels and then in Rogue One.
Yep. You nailed it.
Oh, yeah.
So Saw's got an arc, and we know where Saw starts and we know where Saw ends very explicitly. So we worked with Lucasfilm to try and just dial that in to the right place in his storyline. At this point, as far as like how it ties into Fallen Order and what we see in the events of Kashyyyk, Saw is really maybe one of the only, at least from our knowledge, the galaxy's a big place, but he may be one of the biggest armed resistances against the Empire in the entire galaxy at this point. So he might kind of be the face of what the rebellion doesn't exist
Right.
as we know it, right? As the New Hope rebellion. So maybe Saw is the rebellion at this point, the armed rebellion at this point. And Cal finds that to be very compelling. I think you see in their interaction, he kind of looks up to Saw a little bit because Saw is this guy who's one man with a ragtag crew of freedom fighters who's taking it to Palpatine and the forces of fascism and imperialism across the galaxy, and that for somebody like Cal, that's somebody to look up to.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's Saw Gerrera, and he has his own methods and his own ways and his own tragedy and his own story, and so Cal's going to learn a lot from Saw through their interaction. But it's very, very entertaining working out the relationship between them. You can see in the demo. Cal kind of scoffs at the notion of Saw scoffs at the notion of Cal being a Jedi, saying that they're all dead. And even when he's presented with a lightsaber, he's like, "Did you get that off a corpse?" So he's kind of challenging Cal's bona fides. At the same time, though, he's maybe manipulating Cal a little bit,
Sure.
realizing if this kid is a Jedi, if he is a Padawan, how do I get him to use him as a weapon to strike back against the Empire?
Something similar we see with Ezra in Rebels. So
A little bit,
that
yeah.
tracks.
Although that's further on in the
Right,
storyline,
right.
and Saw's a bit of a different character by that point. Yeah.
But still kind of that manipulative side to him.
Yep.
How about the second sister?
Well,
Why-
we don't
why
see the
she-
second sister on Kashyyyk.
No, but I mean, just in general. I mean, she's got a mask, and I don't know. Whenever we see a masked character, I'm like, why not just show their face? Maybe we're familiar with that character.
Well, a lot of the Inquisitors tend to wear helmets, or sort of like full face helmets. So really, just trying to match the design of the existing Inquisitors. Although I can say, because I read it in an EA document, it's not a existing character. The second
Oh.
sister is an entirely original character.
Okay. That's actually, I was about to throw is it Barriss Offee at you?
I knew you were going to say that.
All right. Well, I wasn't expecting to actually have an answer to that.
Yep.
How does
Which is a very good guess, and
Yeah.
we kind of wanted to come out and say like that's fantastic lore sleuthing on the part of the community, but it's she's an original character.
Okay. How would you say she differs from the other Inquisitors, if at all?
I think I'll just touch on what we said at Celebration, since she's really not a part of what we show on Kashyyyk, and the focus here is really on Kashyyyk and gameplay. she differs from other Star Wars villains we've seen in that she's not about, raw savagery like Darth Maul, or consummate power like Darth Vader, or galactic manipulation like Sidious. The second sister is usually the smartest person in the room. She's incredibly devious, her mind's incredibly twisted, and she knows what you're going to do, 5 minutes before you do, and she's manipulating into her end. So that's really her angle, and how we want to represent her in the game is somebody who's always 2 steps ahead of the competition.
Cool.
And is always thinking ahead.
I like that. Will we get to learn any more about the Inquisitorius or see other Inquisitors?
We haven't said anything about that yet, but given that one of our major game antagonists is an Inquisitor, there's a good possibility there.
Right on. Well, I think those are all my questions. So thank you guys so much. You actually gave me a lot more than I was expecting. The counter wasn't as high as I thought it would be. But yeah, I'm really excited to play it in a little bit or watch the full demo, and I think they're going to let us run through what they're calling the gauntlet.
Okay. Oh yeah, the combat gauntlet. Cool.
Yeah, so I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to trying it out. I can't wait to see the full thing in November.
Cool. Well, Nick, games are made by teams, and Nick and I are just honored to represent the team back at Respawn. Everybody's really busting their tuchus trying to make this one absolutely fantastic for you guys. So yeah.
So you can guarantee you're going to enjoy it
Yeah.
when it finally comes out.
I can't wait. Well, thanks for talking to me.
Thanks.
Thanks.
I hope you enjoyed that talk with Aaron and Nick. Check out more interviews with them by Battlefront Updates, Eckert's Ladder, and Hello Greedo. I know we all approached our questions differently, like I was mostly focused on story details, of course, so they're all worth a watch or a listen if you're just trying to devour as much info as you can about Fallen Order. I'll link to them in the cards as they're released. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, and consider checking out my Patreon page. As always, thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.